The Suicide Squad left me stumped, because how did a studio who just made Wonder Woman 1984, one of the worst superhero movies ever made, do a total U-turn and make The Suicide Squad, like the best comedy we've had in years and what I think's easily the best movie the DCEU's ever got? Like, what's really interesting here is how The Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman 1984 were made under the same conditions, because both creators, James Gunn and Patty Jenkins, had total creative control, a massive budget, the same studio backing them, as well as DC source material. The only variable was the director, yet the difference between the end products couldn't have been greater. The real question is, how did DC learn its lesson? How did they learn the trick to finding out if a director has what it takes before they bet the farm on them? The answer is that James Gunn has a very specific yet vital trait as a director that Patty Jenkins entirely lacks, and this one trait, literally this single difference between their mentalities as creators, is why The Suicide Squad was great, and why Wonder Woman 1984 was a train wreck, let's be honest. If you're watching are a writer or director, do stick with me to the end, because I cannot wait to share this video with you. It's changed my perspective on so many things, and hopefully it will for you too. In order to explore this properly, we've got to first break down what happens when a producer starts meddling with a film's production, and how all too often that ends in disaster, such as with the original Suicide Squad. Like, you know you've got a crappy producer when they're forgetting their place and acting as if they are the director, altering crucial elements and aspects of the story purely because if they were the director, those would be the choices they'd make. The inevitable result of this is how two, or God forbid, more people's visions merge into one. So instead of having one distinct style in vision, you get this revolting average between the two. Warner Brothers quite clearly used to work this way. For those of you who've repressed what the original Suicide Squad was like, I don't blame you, but it was this weird, sloppily edited, tonal mess of a film which had some scenes trying to be quite heartfelt, but many others which were trying to be outrageous and comedic, and the two tones did not merge well. David Ayer, the original director, claims that his version of the film was a serious character drama, but the thing is, during production of the film, Batman v Superman came out to very negative reviews, and Deadpool came out to frankly quite positive reviews. So the producers at Warner Brothers came to the frankly bonkers conclusion that if a film has a serious tone, that therefore means the critics will hate it, but if it's funny, that therefore means they will love it. So they panicked and forced in a ton of comedic moments inspired by Deadpool that did not gel well with Ayer's vision. As a result, we got a Frankenstein of a movie. However, it really does seem like Warner Brothers has turned over a new leaf. They've learned their lesson, as they've been notably hands-off with their recent DC productions. And frankly, if you're a writer or director, you must strive to learn from your mistakes and absorb as much information on the craft as possible, because working on yourself is the best way to tell better stories. Now, you're watching videos like mine, which is a great start. Hopefully you find them useful. But if you want to take the next step up, well, you're in luck, because today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. So you guys know what Skillshare is. It's an online learning community with so many classes it boggles the mind. Skillshare's been a long-term sponsor of my channel for about 3 years now, and there's a good reason why. I only endorse brands that I believe in and use myself, and I've personally sunk a good 150 hours into using Skillshare because their classes have so many juicy insights on storytelling. Personally, I treat their classes like audiobooks where I'll listen to them while cooking or playing games, and they're great. And if you click my link in the description, you get a whole month of Skillshare totally for free. But there are only 1,000 slots left, so grab your free month before they run out. There are only so many available. If you're a writer and you've never used Skillshare, you are missing out. Like, I am a better writer because I've used Skillshare. Like, I even released a class in it a couple years back called How to Write a Great Character that you can check out right now. But recommending my own thing is egotistical, so another class I found useful recently is Writing Suspense, How to Write Stories That Thrill in Any Genre by Benjamin Percy, and it's great. The guy touches on a ton of interesting points, but one that I found really useful is how he explores contrasting different feelings back to back in a scene, like using a funny moment just before a tragic one to make it hit the audience even harder in the feels. This class is a great one to start with. Again, do click my link in the description before the 1,000 slots run out and get a whole month of gloriously unlimited access to Skillshare's entire catalogue of categorically great classes and level up your skills today. But anyway, sometimes movie producers can be so irrational, it's bordering on insanity. Quite a few years back, Kevin Smith did a talk shining light onto a time where he worked with a producer exactly like this.
For those of you who don't know, because this is going back a few years now, back in like 96, 97, at one point I was commissioned by Warner Brothers to write a script for a new Superman movie. He goes, it's pending approval of the producer. I said, who's the producer? And they said, John Peters. He used to be Barbra Streisand's hairdresser. And then one day he became a producer. So anyway, I'm going to meet John Peters. And he's like, I got some directives for you if you're going to move forward on the process. 1, I don't want to see him in that suit. 2, I don't want to see him fly. And 3, he's got to fight a giant spider in the 3rd act. He's like, all right, no flying. I said, but the giant spider intrigues me. And he said, because there's going to be a scene in this movie, a scene that I want. I want that moment in this movie. I want some doors to open up, but big fucking spiders there. So I went back to Warner Brothers and sat down with them, and they said, we heard from him, he likes you, we're going to hire you, you're going to move forward. Did he bring up the spider? I said, he did. He brought up the spider. Did he tell you guys about the spider? They're like, every day with the fucking spider. So they turn around, they tell me, like, Kevin, we're kind of done. Tim wants to go another way with a new writer. And I started throwing Superman stuff away, because who needs to be reminded? But I was really reminded the next summer when I went to the movies and saw a movie that John Peters had produced. And it was called The Wild Wild West.
For those of you who don't know, Wild Wild West was a western starring Will Smith, a really quite bad movie, where in the 3rd act, a giant mechanical spider shows up which the heroes have to defeat. The genre of the film is western, by the way. Okay, it's unfair to point at such an absurdly bad producer and pretend that's what they're all like. But while this is an extreme example, it also proves the universal fact that the more people you have fighting for control over a project, the worse the end product becomes, as it lacks any kind of consistent vision. The phrase "too many cooks spoils the broth" exists for a reason, and the Star Wars sequels are a good example of this. If just one person directed all 3 of those films, it would have undeniably been a stronger trilogy overall. Like, thank God the Suicide Squad didn't have a producer with veto power over everything. If they did, and they saw how James Gunn introduces the Warner Brothers title card with the exploded brains of one of the characters in the ocean, like, for a fact, that producer would have stopped him in his tracks. But the fact that that did make it to the final cut makes for a really morbidly funny joke. If the Suicide Squad were test screened, when Bloodsport has that sit down with his daughter and the audience expects some emotional backstory to endear us to his character, but then they start screaming and swearing at each other, like the audience might have said in the interview, well, it was funny, but that scene didn't make me care about Bloodsport's character. The producers might have panicked, reshot it, and we would have lost a really funny trope subversion. The fact the movie consistently has these absurd, over-the-top, macabre moments that I don't want to show in this video because I will get demonetized, it really gives this film an incredibly strong, dependable voice and style that a film that's test screened to death or, manipulated by a controlling producer, such as the first Suicide Squad, entirely lacks. George R.R. Martin once said something that plays into this whole topic of creative control, and he said it really quite well.
Much as I love my fans, I've also been known to say art is not a democracy. You can't always do the popular thing. I mean, that's the mistake the networks make and the studios with these focus groups and test things where, they test an ending to see if it will be popular. They test a character. Sometimes you have concepts or ideas that are not immediately popular, but nonetheless are the right thing to do to tell your story. I mean, if I had said, okay, fans, should I kill Ned at the end of the first book? He would still be kicking around. I mean, nobody would have voted to kill him, but nonetheless, killing him was the right thing to do, at least for me and my readers.
Now, Martin has a great point here, and it's bang on, it's totally correct. But if there's one thing that the Star Wars prequels, for example, quite clearly show, while great art is not a democracy, it can't be an autocracy either. Give the director too little control, the film is going to be a directionless mess. But if the production is a total tyrannical dictatorship and only the creator has a say in what does or doesn't happen, that creator will likely become blind to the easily fixable flaws in their vision. Case in point in Tenet, when most people didn't have a bloody clue what what anyone was saying most of the time, and the movie will be worse than it otherwise would have been because they didn't have someone above them, such as a producer, to tell them when to stop. It's quite easy to deduce that Lucas, when directing the Star Wars prequels, was surrounded by yes men. And even more tragically, it's quite clear Lucas was crippled with anguish after filming was over because he realised exactly that too late. Here's a clip showing George Lucas's initial reaction to the first cut of The Phantom Menace.
Boggles the mind. I mean, I've thought about this quite a bit, and the tricky part is you almost can't take any of those pieces out of there now. Because each one kind of takes you to the next place, and you can't jump.
No, I love it.
You don't know where you are. It is a very hard movie to follow, and at the same time, I've done it a little more extremely than I've ever done in the past. It's stylistically designed to be that way, and you can't undo that, but we can diminish the effects of it. If it's intense for us, a regular person's gonna go nuts.
What just makes that clip even more perfect is how Lucas said that last bit in response to one of his team saying,
You think about the very first Star Wars, sitting in there.
Yeah. No, I know.
And it starts open, and you don't know what the hell.
I do a particular kind of movie of which this is consistent, but it is a very hard movie to follow.
Lucas had just voiced what proved to be a totally bang-on critique of his own film, and the other guy did nothing but say the movie is great as it is, because the original Star Wars was confusing, therefore it's fine for this one to be too. So much so, Lucas had to be the one to really put his foot down and insist he's made a mistake, because no one around him wanted to admit that the great George Lucas might, just might, have made some bad decisions. Like, just look at this guy. He's such a yes man. Like, you can actually see the aura of yes manishness he's given off. This is a large part of the reason why The Phantom Menace was as flawed a film as it was. Lucas, as a director, was not challenged by the people around him enough. And if you ask me, I think that's partly why Wonder Woman 1984 was such a miserably bad film, because Jenkins was surrounded by yes men. But before you think it, that's not the root cause as to why The Suicide Squad is 5 orders of magnitude better than Wonder Woman 2. It's just a symptom of the reason. And what I think's the true root cause of all of this? Well, Patty Jenkins did an interview with Empire just before Wonder Woman 1984's release, and she said something so ridiculous I'm a little shocked it totally flew under the radar and nobody talked about it, because she said something wholly terrible but utterly fascinating. When speaking on 1984, Jenkins was asked, was it difficult to retain creative control? To which Jenkins replied, oh yeah, I did end up having complete creative control, but it was a battle the entire time. It was brutally hard. I was lucky in a couple of ways. People were so out of their depths with what I was doing, they didn't have any opinion, and luckily I had Charlize by my side. I was lucky to be partnered with someone strong and brave and with a shared vision. So let's take a closer look at her words here, because Jenkins is doing a Freudian slip and revealing her fundamental beliefs around what makes for a good director, and they just so happen to be the worst beliefs a director can possibly have. Firstly, Jenkins is saying that her vision was so incredible and complex that next to no one around her could grasp its genius in this highlighted bit here, and that portrays an alarmingly inflated ego. If any director ever said this would ring alarm bells, but it's even worse for Jenkins because it's quite obvious he wasn't even attempting anything avant-garde or trying to push the boundaries, but instead, as any sane human can clearly see, this was just another generic, uninspired superhero film. But let's be clear, there is nothing wrong with having tremendous faith in yourself. In fact, I'd argue that you need faith in yourself in order to be a good artist. But there is something terribly wrong with this specific brand of ego, the kind best described as arrogance, the kind that might lead you to believe that if anyone is ever confused, angry, or otherwise not amazed by something you've done, that therefore means they are too simple to understand your divine brilliance. If any artist says anything remotely close to this, that is a massive red flag, perhaps the second worst red flag you could ever hope to see in a director. And the first worst red flag you can see in the word Jenkins uses to describe being surrounded by people who never express their opinions. Lucky. If you want to conclusively unlock the truth as to why Wonder Woman 1984 was an absolute train wreck of a film, this right here is the key. Because the subtext behind this all, Jenkins accidentally confessed that she despises feedback. So much so, she considers herself lucky when she's creating an environment where she receives none of it. You can see the sentiment again when she uses the word battle to describe trying to enact her vision while working with others. She could have used the word negotiation, or even better, collaboration, but instead Jenkins describes it as a battle, betraying the fact that if anyone were to ever disagree with her during production, she defaults to viewing them as an enemy, to be defeated. Perhaps that last bit, looking at the use of the word battle, is maybe looking at it a bit too closely. Like, I'll admit, like, there might be nothing to that, but the rest of it, it's downright fascinating, because after reading this interview, it all made so much more sense why Wonder Woman 1984 was as bad a film as it was, because the sole person in charge had this mentality. Jenkins quite obviously and quite keenly surrounded herself with yes men, the kind of people who, when they have a concern that something's not working or a suggestion for a potential improvement, they keep their mouth sewn shut. Going back to George Lucas, it's safe to say he is a creative genius. Like, the guy has an incredible imagination. But that's the thing about creativity, because creative people don't just come up with all of the best ideas, they also come up with all of the worst. And no matter how brilliant the mind of the person in charge, that creator will have stupid ideas every now and then. If you watching are a writer or director, it's guaranteed there are flaws in your vision. For a fact, guaranteed. So having both the key trait of humility and a team of honest, well-informed people around you, ready to say, George, this movie's got potential, but maybe Jar Jar needs to go, that really is the best approach to have when telling a story. And it's clear as day that this ideal approach is the very one that James Gunn used when directing The Suicide Squad.
I'm also really open to listening to other people's ideas. It doesn't mean I don't always take them, but truly, Judiana and Beth they're like my creative partners, and I'm with them a lot, and they're whispering things in my ear about, I don't really, people probably get upset, I don't really like that hair, is not working for me, you know what? Because I've come to trust them over a long time now, and we really have an open communication with all of that stuff.
I think the trait Gunn has that Jenkins lacks is really starting to get quite obvious. James Gunn, in that interview, while speaking about the team around him, says,
make sure, that my vision is the same as Judiana's vision, is the same as Henry Bram's vision, the cinematographer is the same for Beth Nichols' vision, and we're all seeing the same movie before we ever make it.
Basically saying all of the core members of his team understand what the end product will look like long before production begins. Meanwhile, Patty Jenkins says the exact opposite of, only I know the vision of the movie, those around me are working in the blind, and more or less the impact they're having on my vision amounts to zero. The first director just released what's probably the best ever entry into the DCEU, and the second just released what's arguably the worst. I'm sure you can connect the dots. So thanks for watching today's video, guys. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to check out Skillshare. It really is a great place to be if you want to level up your writing craft. Like, I am a better writer because I use Skillshare. Can't recommend it enough. If you want to get a totally free month-long trial, a free month of learning, basically, do click my link in the description. There should also be a thing on screen right now that will take you to the same place to get your free Skillshare trial as well. Not only will you learn a ton of useful tidbits with Skillshare, but it really does help my channel when you use my links. So you're not just learning, you're also supporting me on top of it, so thank you very much if you do use the link. Anyway, I've got to get back to my Cyberpunk video that I'm doing something very special with, but it's taking a very long time. Don't forget to hit the like button, and I'll see you guys next time on The Closer Look.